Former U.S. President Donald Trump prepares to surrender in New York. Hello, I'm Mike Walter filling in for Anna Naidu, and this is The Heat. A historic day is about to play out in New York on Tuesday when former U.S. President Donald Trump is expected to turn himself into authorities. Trump, who was indicted last week, arrived back in New York on Monday after traveling from his residence in Florida. He is the first American president to be indicted. The charges center on Trump's alleged involvement in hush money payments to a porn star who claims the two had an affair. We begin with CGTN's White House correspondent Nathan King, who is covering the story in New York. Nathan, this is historic, unprecedented in the United States. Tell us what's expected to happen on Tuesday when Trump turns himself in.
Yeah, good to see you, Mike. Yeah, I'm outside Trump Tower, which, remember, was the White House in waiting when he shocked the nation and became president. Well, he's shocking the nation again. The only president to be, well, former president to be charged with a crime. So essentially what will happen, we understand, is around about lunchtime, he's going to emerge from Trump Tower here behind me and head downtown to the Manhattan court, right at the tip of Manhattan, where he will be arraigned. Essentially, that's when you, me, and Donald Trump will know exactly what he's charged with. Now, we don't know exactly, but we understand it's to do with hush money payments, as you said, to Stormy Daniels, an adult film star, on the eve of that 2016 election. And essentially, Michael Cohen, his big-time advisor, went to jail for it because he basically said Donald Trump directed me to do it. Now, hushing people up with money is not a crime, but it could be election crime because he's used it to cover up bad news on the eve of a vote. And also, he could be falsifying business records. Now, this doesn't sound a lot, but we understand there's more. We just don't know what it is. On the current thinking, he could face charges that could lead to about 4 years in jail. Now, felonies, if you've not been violent and if you haven't done it before, and, you know, Trump's been in court a lot over his decades, long before being president. Remember, he's a big real estate mogul here in New York. There's been never any charges, and he's never committed a violent act, so it's unlikely he would serve prison time. So what we're going to see is him in the court, although we don't know whether there'll be TV cameras, and then he will be probably released under his own recognizance. That essentially means he can go away and come back whenever there is a trial. And that's a big question. When's the trial going to be? He's running for president, so it's definitely probably going to be while he's running for the White House.
Very interesting indeed. How is Donald Trump and his legal team pushing back on all of this? And when are we likely to hear from him again after he makes this appearance in court on Tuesday?
Well, I think we'll hear two words in court: not guilty. That's all we know, essentially, because he's been very quiet, and I think he's been quiet for a reason. It's because when this enters into an indictment phase, you've been charged, you can't really say much about the case. Otherwise, you could actually have charges for obstructing justice. He may face that in other court cases when it relates to his documents that he took from the White House to Mar-a-Lago. Remember, also, he's facing charges potentially over the January 6th insurrection, attempted coup, election manipulation in Georgia. So this is actually the easiest case. So he's going to be probably very quiet. Now, as a New Yorker, you'd expect him to give a big speech here at Trump Tower. No, he is going back to Mar-a-Lago. Sorry. He's going back to Mar-a-Lago, we understand, his Palm Beach residence, where he's essentially moved to, and then give a live speech from there. It'll be very interesting to see if there's a change in tone from complete defiance and everyone's out to get me and I am standing with you to let the legal process go through. We'll wait and see, but all depends on those few minutes in court from about 2:15 local time here, where essentially he'll be read the charges, we'll know the charges, and we'll just know how serious it is for this first president, former president, to be charged in American history. Remember, he was twice impeached too while in office.
Nathan, thanks so much for the live update. I know you're going to be busy over the next couple of days. Thanks again. Really appreciate it.
Oh, yeah.
Time now to hear from our panel. Joining us here in Washington, D.C. is Adolfo Franco. He is an attorney and Republican strategist. From California, we're joined by Spencer Critchley. He was a two-time campaign advisor to former President Barack Obama. Also with us from Wilmington, Delaware is Brandon Brice. He's a columnist and host of the conservative radio talk show, The Brice is Right. And joining the discussion, too, is Douglas Sloan. He is a principal and senior political analyst at National Capital Strategy Group. I want to thank all of you for joining us. Adolfo, why don't I start with you? Undoubtedly unprecedented, historic day, but we saw a lot of what we see with Donald Trump. This almost seemed like a reality TV show. I think CNN broke away from a commercial to show his plane taking off. We saw the motorcade, a lot of fanfare, pageantry. What did you make of today, the spectacle, and of course, the historic aspect of it as well?
Well, I don't think it's a lot of expected from Donald Trump. It's a lot of expected from the Democrats that have been out to destroy Donald Trump from before he took office. You have to remember that Mr. Raskin, one of the impeachment managers, before he was inaugurated as president, said impeachment needed to begin on day one. Now, if that doesn't tell you the weaponization by the Democrats, every one of these charges that are going to be brought and the jurisdictions mentioned in the report by Nathan are all done by Democrat prosecutors. And to be clear with the viewers, in the case of New York, which I know you're mostly focused on, Alvin Bragg is a politician. He ran to get Donald Trump on a platform before he even saw any evidence or anything of a crime or any investigation had been launched. So what I see, this is not Donald Trump. This is just the Democratic Party. It's a tragic day for the country. A Rubicon has been crossed in the political persecution of political opponents. You have to remember, Mike, Bill Clinton committed perjury. And nobody, he was impeached. He committed perjury. He lied under oath, and nobody pursued that. He gave $850,000 in hush money to Paula Jones. I never saw an investigation of that. Mr. Comey, the FBI director in 2016, said with respect to Hillary Clinton's violations of federal law, no prosecutor in his or her mind, or right mind, would bring charges against a presidential candidate or a public figure of this kind. And again, as Nathan's reported, did you hear that? Bookkeeping, this supposedly hush money payments and so forth. We've gone over this with Mr. Edwards. Federal prosecutors looked at the exact same matters 7 years ago. This Stormy Daniels matter is not new to the American people or to the prosecutors, including Mr. Bragg. So this is pure political persecution.
So, Spencer, persecution, weaponization, a couple of the words we heard just moments ago, not evidence and testimony, which I guess you'd have to have that in order to indict someone. What's your take on things?
Well, if the charge is that Democrats are against Donald Trump, I agree. If we spell Democrats with a small d, meaning people who believe in democracy. And unfortunately, this is the usual bad faith smokescreen that gets churned up by Trump supporters. And engaging with any of the points Adolfo just made is a waste of time and would be a deliberately intended trip into the weeds. The situation here is not Democrats versus Republicans, at least in any way that those parties have been defined previously. That's why so many Republicans of good faith are such strong opponents of Donald Trump. It's not because for some reason people dislike him personally. Again, the other side would like us to believe that this is all personal, it's all political. There's no such thing as the rule of law. And there's no such thing as a legitimate democracy if they have their way. That's the key issue here. This is not left versus right within the traditional American democratic system. Somebody who is a far-right libertarian conservative who believes in democracy, and someone who's at the far left, say a Bernie Sanders-style social democrat who still believes in democracy, those two people have far more in common than either does with a Trumpist, because a Trumpist is somebody who supports authoritarianism based on ethnic nationalism. This is just a direct attack on democracy that Donald Trump has been leading. And that's why I say small d Democrats do oppose Donald Trump, meaning people who still believe in democracy.
Brandon, let me ask you about Trump, because we know one thing about him, that he does love the camera. He's loved him for decades. He's been in front of him for decades, courted coverage throughout his career to his advantage. I mean, it propelled him all the way to the presidency. But now his attorneys are opposing cameras in the courtrooms. Are you surprised at that?
You know, it's interesting with this president because he's very different than any kind of president I think this country has ever seen. It's a sad day in America when we're talking about a president possibly going to jail or going to prison. But let's look at the facts here. Number one, since day one, Manhattan DA Alvin Bragg was against the president. The Attorney General, Tish James, was against the president. They both were backed by George Soros, who, guess what, is and was against this president. So the problem here is I'm not sure if we're talking about whether you're a Democrat or Republican or whether you like Trump or not. That's irrelevant here. In America, you are innocent until proven guilty. And the problem is this, and I put a forewarning to Democrats who are pushing this, be careful, because this now sets the precedent for presidents to come. Oh, by the way, we've got a president whose son has some issues right now. So I think politically, this is bad. This is a bad taste. I go back to saying the way you beat Donald Trump is not in the courtroom, it's at the ballot box.
Okay, Brandon, that's not what I asked. I asked if you were surprised that he's opposing cameras in the courtroom.
I'm not, because this is who he is. But again, I go back to saying what I just said, is that this is a unique president where the more media this guy gets, the stronger his brand becomes to become president. And I'll say this, I'll say this on your show. If the verdict here finds this president not guilty, he will be the front runner in 2024.
Douglas, let me ask you about, obviously, any comments, and I think Nathan touched on this as well, about this indictment are premature in the sense that we're just really speculating because it is sealed. CNN is saying sources familiar with the case indicating that Trump could face up to 30 counts. He's been able to manage the court of public opinion throughout his career, but this will be a court of law. And it seems like judges have a tendency to kind of sit on people who want to do shenanigans on social media or whatever. And he does know how to use the bully pulpit. But here's a man who was once commander-in-chief, but he won't have that role in the courtroom. How much leeway is the judge going to give in this case so it doesn't turn into some kind of media circus, do you think?
Well, the judge is really going to have to take control and maintain control of this court. This could quickly go off the rails with Donald Trump in the courtroom. And it's interesting, he doesn't want cameras in there, which is something that a question you had asked. And I believe he doesn't want cameras in there because he wants to be able to control the narrative. If there are no cameras showing him in court kind of in a subservient role to a judge, he could come out of that courtroom on a regular basis and kind of spin whatever narrative he wants to. But with cameras in the courtroom, he's not going to be able to lie about it. And, you know, there's really a chance that this could go off the rails. So the judge is going to have to be very careful in terms of maintaining control of the courtroom. And I also just say this in terms of the indictment. We don't know what's in the indictment. No one is going to know what's in the indictment until tomorrow during their arraignment. However, it is the same facts in this indictment that put Michael Cohen behind bars. They're using the same facts of what got Michael Cohen sent to prison. And the other person that was involved in these matters is right now at Rikers prison, Alan Weisselberg. So the two people that were involved in these matters have either served jail time or in jail now. And, you know, there's just a string of different business partners and cronies from Trump that have gone to jail. So this just seems like a logical progression that you would eventually get to the heart of the matter of what all these convicts and ex-cons, Paul Manafort, Michael Cohen, Alan Weisselberg have in common and get at Donald Trump. It's a logical progression. This was coming. The wheels of justice turn slowly, but they will get to you in this country.
You know, Adolfo, there are a lot of articles out there today. I was looking online about the Trump mugshot. There's been so much speculation about this. Just a couple of the headlines. I'm going to throw it at you, and I want to get your reaction. Attorney says Trump mugshot should be private, stay private. Another says Trump mugshot may stay sealed after the arrest. And then another was a question, will the Trump mugshot become a defining image of the 21st century? But then there's another one, and this is one I kind of want to get your thoughts on. Marketing experts say that mugshot can be used as a rallying cry, and this is one of the things that Trump's been very adept at. How do you see the mugshot playing in all of this, and can he use it as another method to raise money?
Well, I don't know. The answer probably is yes. In terms of the mugshot, I can't imagine that in this country that everything eventually comes out. I can't imagine a mugshot forever, maybe for a period of time, being kept under seal. I just can't imagine that. In fact, the only felony that we know has been committed has been the leaking of information to the press from a grand jury proceeding, which is either Mr. Bragg and his staff or grand jurors. So that's the only felony. So yeah, that's an indication that everything is leaked. So I don't know if it will be or not. But I have to say a couple things. Just to be clear with the audience, Mr. Spencer, who has the rhetoric there and suffers from Trump-Derangement syndrome and hate, is driven by hate. He hates this man, so he's willing to manipulate.
Excuse me, Mr. Franco.
The people. I didn't interrupt you, Spencer. The people that are bringing this action are capital D Democrats. There's no question. These are politicians. These are in Georgia. These are in New York. These are political people and there is something in our country called persecutorial abuse, and this is exactly what is taking place now. With respect to the politics of this, Mike, to correct the record, and Mr. Spencer, 87% of Republicans support Donald Trump. I don't know where he's getting these legions of people. In the last 4 or 5 days, Donald Trump has raised $7 million and has surged in the polls. He's now 25% ahead of Governor DeSantis, and in a field of 10 possible contenders, he has 54% approval. So if anything is happening here is Donald Trump's support is growing because there's a realization that the people who hate Donald Trump are hell-bent on changing the system, weaponizing the system, and crossing this Rubicon. And my colleague in Delaware is absolutely right. This is going to come back and haunt future presidents, Democrat or Republicans. It's a tragic day in America. We didn't do it with Bill Clinton's perjury. We didn't do it with Bill Clinton's hush money payments. We didn't do it with Hillary Clinton's violations of federal law, erasing thousands of emails, and Mr. Comey correctly saying nobody in their right mind and a public figure brings these actions. So that has to be put in this context. This rule of law stuff, Mr. Bragg is a political hack from New York who's going to run for governor of that state. That's his agenda here. He's making a name for himself at the expense of the rule of law.
Spencer, I want to give you a chance to respond.
Thank you. Yeah, so, I mean, as usual, unfortunately, virtually none of that was actually true.
You can't answer.
But I leave people to, Google to chase down each of those falsehoods rather than waste their time here. Now, there's a couple of really much more important things that I want to highlight here. The accusation that I am motivated by hatred, for example, is the classic demonization that's at work in this assault on democracy. And similarly, I can't remain silent with Brandon repeating the grotesque anti-Semitic meme so popular on the right now, blaming George Soros somehow for being what he is frequently referred to as a puppet master, which is a phrase now being repeated by multiple mainstream Republicans as well as Donald Trump himself, repeating a vicious anti-Semitic meme that goes back centuries now. I assume that Republicans are not opposed to people donating money to causes they believe in or candidates they believe in. That is what George Soros is supposedly guilty of. Well, that's not objectionable, of course. What is objectionable? He's Jewish and he's rich, and he fits the stereotype of the international Jewish cabal that's supposedly running the world behind the scenes. Now, this might sound like outrageous, but unfortunately, this has become mainstream under the Trump Republican Party. And as Edmund Burke, an actual conservative, famously said, all evil requires is for good men to remain silent. And I cannot remain silent when I hear people invoke the name of George Soros, having to know what that name is laden with, thanks to all the hate mongering that the Trumpist Republicans are doing.
You're the one that's
Adolfo accusing me of being motivated by hatred.
Hold on. I want to give Brandon a chance to respond to that. And Brandon, just to his point, in the Washington Post this weekend, there was the columnist who does the four Pinocchios. He said that Soros did not back Bragg. He may have backed some other candidates, but he did not give him financial support. So I want to throw that out there. A lot of people are saying that. And I do want to give you a chance to respond to what Spencer just said.
So again, first of all, what Spencer said is completely ridiculous, and it's not even worth me even responding.
What is the relevance of George Soros, Brandon?
I let you talk. I let you talk. Let me talk. I let you talk. I let you talk.
Let's address the topic.
Give me that same respect. Give me that same respect. Give me that same respect. Let's look at the facts here. We're talking about an indictment here. Excuse me. We're talking about an indictment here. We're talking about the fact that in this country you are innocent until proven guilty.
No, I'm talking about
politics. Hold on. Excuse me. I let you talk. Excuse me. I let you talk.
No,
now you're going to let me talk. Now you're going to let me talk. The reality is we have a Manhattan DA. Excuse me. We have a Manhattan DA and we have an attorney general that have both been anti-Donald Trump since day one. So let's look at the facts here. Is that I'm not saying. Because George Soros has funded many of these candidates that are opposed to certain values. But that's not what we're talking about here. Excuse me. Again, I let you talk, you'll give me the same respect. We're talking about the fact on Tuesday, we will find out if this president is guilty. What I'm saying is that if this president is found not guilty, what this is going to do is not only increase the base, but it's going to make this president stronger, and it now sets a precedent for future presidents to beware, because you could go to jail after you become president.
All right,
that's what I said.
Okay.
Put words in my mouth.
I think we have to, gentlemen, we don't have that much more time. I want to turn the corner on this. Douglas, Trump's no stranger to courtrooms. In fact, USA Today did an analysis. They've said that he's been involved in more than 4,000 lawsuits. He's developed a strategy that Politico writes about. They said Trump has spent decades refining tactics for prolonging his legal fights, as his lawyers attempt to outweigh and outlast the patience of his adversaries. The method is delay, delay, delay. Given that and the many, many motions that they can put forward and the efforts at basically trying to get Alvin Bragg off of this case. You've heard these two gentlemen complain he shouldn't be on this case. The judge as well. How long is this proceeding going to last, do you think?
Well, I can't really speak to that because we haven't even, we don't even know what's in the indictment yet. So once the indictment has been unsealed and we get an idea of what the charges are, then we'll get an idea of the motions to dismiss that will be filed by Trump's legal team and where they stand legally. But you're right, this is not Trump's first time in court. He's been in court many times. Jean Carroll's defamation rape case is coming up in 2 weeks, I know, and that's a civil case, but he will have to take the stand. And then you have what's going on in Fulton County in Georgia regarding him interference with the free and fair election. Fani Willis is likely going to have an indictment before the end of April because there's a deadline on how long they can have the grand jury sequestered. So, and then of course you have seditious conspiracy with Department of Justice with January 6th, and you have the taking classified documents to Mar-a-Lago, and some new evidence just got released on that, saying that they have evidence that Trump actually was looking through those boxes of documents after the FBI requested him to try to sort them out. So he really has his hands full legally, and I will take issue with my two Republican counterparts here saying that that's going to strengthen him. There's no way that independent voters and moderate Democrats are going to go over to Trump's side after this. Yes, it will strengthen them in the Republican primaries. Yes, it will strengthen the Republican base. But I think we've seen that Trump cannot win with the Republican base alone. So all of these indictments and legal actions are really hurting him.
Yeah, Adolfo, let me ask you this question. Bill Barr was on the Sunday shows, and he said, I'm not a lawyer. Generally, I think it's a bad idea to take the stand. And then he talked about Trump. He said, I think it's particularly bad idea for Trump because he lacks all self-control. Given the fact that Trump does like to speak and speak in volumes, how difficult is it going to be for his attorneys to try and maintain that and not have him go on the stand?
Well, a couple of things here. First of all, with respect, I have a lot of respect for Attorney General Barr, but it's funny how the left and programs like these that lean to the left cherry pick Mr. Barr's comments. Mr. Barr is also one that said the Trump campaign was spied on, and it's very clear. So it's clear when it's convenient. But the answer to the question is the fact there's a different Donald Trump. There's the Donald Trump I know in private, and there's a Donald Trump that is in public. And in a courtroom setting, and he's a sophisticated individual, is a very different than the public persona that you see. So I think it will be a very serious and a very deliberate Donald Trump, and he understands he has a very good counsel, and he is not going to conduct himself the way he does in public. That is a different forum and a different venues to answer that question. I have a lot of respect for my friend Douglas Sloan. He's very right on many, many things, but I have to remind him you have to win the nomination of the Republican Party before you can be the nominee of the party, obviously. And Donald Trump's these persecutions, I would say the more the merrier. The more these things are being brought by Democrat prosecutors with a capital D, Spencer, the more this goes on, the more he is strengthened by these. As it's the same stage with these bogus impeachments, of which, of course, he was acquitted. And he will be found, I believe, not guilty in all of this. That, I think, will help him with independent voters and others. This will stretch, by the way, well into next year, this trial. I think he will be perceived as a political prisoner of sorts, and that will help him. Lastly, Mr. Soros, when the Koch brothers gave money to Republicans, all the time you were saying the Koch brothers, money from the Koch brothers from Republicans. You're the one, Spencer, that's attaching anti-Semitism. That means you can't criticize someone who's Jewish or who's black. No one said Jewish or black. Mr. Soros is a political activist. It's his right to do that, but he's a left-wing advocate, zealot, and people need to know that these
All right.
these left-wing
got the point on Soros. We've spent a lot of time on George Soros. Spencer, let me ask you about this. The mayor of New York was out warning protesters to be on their best behavior. What do you expect to see outside the courtroom tomorrow?
Well, hopefully a continuation of today when there was almost nobody showing up, which must have been terribly disappointing for Mr. Trump. But more importantly, nobody
All right, I believe we lost the signal. That's the benefit of technology, which is can be troubling at times. And I believe that's probably all the time we have left in the discussion. I want to thank our participants. It's been a lively debate, and that's going to do it for us. Thanks again for joining us.
The nature of business is to bring value. Business activities in Europe, Asia, and the U.S. reach consumers globally. Trade, manufacturing, energy, high-tech, real estate, consumption. We give an expanded view on global business and how it covers, influences, or relates to the whole world. Global business, only on CGTN.